Welcome, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Myth is All Around Us. Today, our topic is dreams, and my guest is Dr. Stephen Eisenstadt, the Chancellor and founding President of Pacifica Graduate Institute, an accredited graduate school offering master's and doctoral dream programs framed in the traditions of depth psychology. He is a professor of depth psychology with a PhD in clinical psychology and has explored the power of dreams through depth psychology and his own research for more than 35 years, which has included conducting hundreds of DreamWorks seminars in the US, Asia, and Europe, as well as collaborations with the likes of Joseph Campbell, James Hillman, Marion Woodman, Robert Johnson, and native elders from around the world. Dr. Eisenstadt's book, Dream Tending, describes new applications of dream work in relation to health and healing, nightmares, the world's dream, relationships, and the creative process. And he will also be one of the keynote speakers at the upcoming 2014 Annual Dream Conference, June 4 through 8 in Berkeley, California. Welcome, and thank you so much for making time for us today.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's good to be here.
Thank you. Now, dream tending. The basic premise that I know one of the basic premises is the difference between association, amplification, and animation, which is dream tending. If you could explain that to our audience.
Okay. I think what sets dream tending apart from other more traditional systems of understanding dreams is this whole idea of tending. Mm-hmm. Tending, different than interpreting or analyzing. To tend a dream is to listen to the dream and allow the dream itself to come forward. It's as if we befriend the dream or host the images or the figures or the landscapes that are in the dream. So to dream tend is to listen carefully and to reflect what you were sharing, to allow the image to come to life, to vivify, to animate, to open themselves. Because in a way, when we think about a dream, and we remember them in the morning, we appreciate most of the time we see ourselves inside the dream. Mm-hmm. So from that point of view, if we see ourselves inside the dream, the obvious question is, who's dreaming the dream? And that's one of the primary ideas in dream tending. It's the who that's dreaming the dream, and more often than not, it can be imagined that it's the figures themselves in the dream that have so much to say, and they are dreaming the dream, of course, implicating us at every turn. Yeah.
And also the different questions that you're asking about the dream.
We ask two questions that probably differentiate dream tending from other systems. The questions that we're trained into are, and understandably so, what does this dream mean? Mm-hmm. Right? And of course we get curious about that, and there's relevance. You know, everybody, or most people, almost everybody, that shares a dream with me, the first thing that we want to know is, what does this dream mean?
It's human nature.
It's human nature.
Yeah.
What does this dream mean? And the second question is, why is it happening to me, right? Mm-hmm. But appreciate that from the beginning, when we start with those questions, we're already thinking through a way of connecting this dream to an already established system of ideas or metaphors or images, right? And in dream tending, we change the question slightly, or actually profoundly.
Yeah, really.
Now, what does it mean and why is it happening? We go to, who's visiting now? Which images? Who are you? Who's visiting in the dream? Which figures are present in this particular dream? And then what's happening here? What's going on? What's the activity in the dream itself? And by situating ourselves in that position in relation to the dream, all of a sudden we can experience the living actuality of the dream. And that's the key part, the living actuality. It's as if the dream is happening anyway at night, and it comes to life. And as it comes to life, so do we. So the idea of dream tending is not to dissect it or to interpret it or to analyze it away, but in fact to invite it into our lived experience and relationship.
Who is visiting us here? I love that.
Yeah. Well, nightmares of course, a common theme in dream, and most people it gets people's attention. Mm-hmm. If there's something that happens in a dream that's horrific or intolerable or difficult or scary, those are the dreams we often remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are the dreams that parents in particular have a hard time with when their kids wake up either disturbed, agitated, sometimes even screaming. And in fact, with children, we have to differentiate between nightmares and night terrors. And night terrors are those dreams that come, they scare us so vividly and violently sometimes, and yet we wake up and have zero recall. And parents forever will ask me, oh my goodness, is something wrong with my child? Is, what's happening here? And I say to them, it's actually part of growing up. We first have to survey the landscape to make sure there's nothing going on in the home that's problematic or difficult or intrusive. But that not being the case, it's a natural part of children, and there's no correlation whatsoever between night terrors and psychopathology or something, going askew with kids later on in life, and parents always want to know that. Now, nightmares are a different story.
Yeah.
Nightmares, we do wake up in the morning and we have some recollection more often than not. And the way I think about it is that with a nightmare, the dreaming psyche, that which sends the dreams, somehow wants to get our attention. So it's like pulling on our shirt sleeve. Hello, Steve, listening now? And it gets our attention, right? A dream comes and a big flood begins to happen. Or I'm in an airplane and the airplane starts to crash, right? Or I'm being chased by a huge animal through a forest, right? And I get anxious, nervous, and those are the dreams that I tend to remember. So I really like to work with people and nightmares. In fact, when a nightmare comes, I often ask for that for a variety of reasons. One, because it's so vivid and so visceral. We have a real strong reaction to it. And secondly, it kind of breaks away from the normality of life. It really kind of opens a portal, and we can kind of have a glimpse into what's really going on more deeply for us. And sometimes nightmares will recur. People will have the same kind of nightmare again and again, sometimes in this number of weeks or months or even through the years, right? And those images, because they recur, because they're disturbing, forever will have some relevance, have some sense of importance in our lives. They'll either offer us insight into something, they'll warn us away from something, they'll suggest something that still needs more attention, and so on and so forth. I think what you got curious about, what dream tending adds to that idea, is the fact that when a nightmare comes, one of the ideas is to really, in a curious way, befriend the image. And I know that that's, troubling, because most of the time the first thing we want to do is to separate. Of course we do. We want to separate from that image that's so threatening or dangerous, right? However, I think it's real helpful to get to know who is chasing. I mean, what are we going to do? This big animal's in our dream, right? It's kind of coming after us, right? And we can kind of explain it away, even medicate it away. And still, that animal is in the psyche somewhere, and it's going to come back in some form or fashion. So the approach to dream tending is to take very mindful, very conscious, very careful, very supportive frame and allow a person to develop some kind of curiosity and relationship with that image. Now we do that again protectively, so we look for other images that are supportive, or the person that's working with the person that has the dream is very supportive with that. And then we just simply get into a situation where we say to the image, stop, look, you know that I know that you know that I know that you know that I know that I know that you're chasing me. And we've got to, get a stop to that. So the first thing is get a stop, or otherwise we stay in the cycle of fear. Nightmares are important to pay attention to. First, because I have to find out, is there something in my world that is dangerous that needs listening to? After I make that scan, then I find a certain amount of permission, and really I encourage the capacity to get to know who is that figure. Who are you that's showing up in this dream again and again and again? Actually, just an example, just about 3 hours ago I was working with somebody, and they had a tiger that was visiting. Right? Tiger came in the dream, and it just scared this person. I mean, woke up every night for about a week. And the tiger would come and every night get more and more fierce and show teeth and, ooh. And so, of course, the first thing we want to do is get rid of the tiger.
Of course, yes.
You got to get rid of that tiger.
Human nature,
Human nature, get rid of the tiger. Second thing is I looked at a bunch of dream dictionaries to find out what tiger meant and came up with a whole number of explanations, and they're helpful. They're supportive, they're insightful, they're revealing, and yet the tiger didn't go away, because the tiger in the dream is still present, still snarling, still showing teeth, right?
Yeah.
So I suggested, just a little bit back today, I suggested, another possibility is to really get to know this one. I mean, it so has gotten your attention now. And just to introduce a couple questions, what about this one are you curious about? And in fact, if you were to sketch it out, or just imagine it as in your fantasy, and if you were to follow it about, to notice where it was going, where it might live, what it might be doing, if you could just notice, like a naturalist might, just get a little bit of distance, but also bring an observational eye to it, and notice what tiger's up to. And if you do that, you begin to see what gets revealed. What is tiger here for? What is tiger wanting from me now? And just to give the punchline in this instance, it was always one of those amazing moments, right, when a person bumps into the actuality of what tiger is. When the animal comes into a dream, like tiger, one of the more famous dream persons, Maria Louise von Franz, once said, whenever a tiger comes in, whenever an animal comes into a dream, follow the animal. Because the animal forever will take us to something that we're not aware of and open up a piece of information or knowledge. I mean, that's why E.T. works. You follow the animal. Lassie. Follow Lassie.
Oh.
Yeah. Or follow the white rabbit. Shoo. Follow the animal. Right?
Never thought of that.
Yeah. Or Alice too, you follow the animal, and something will open that otherwise would not. So they're very curious figures, these animals. And back to the nightmare, the idea is whoever it is, or whatever it is that's nightmarish, better to get to know that one. It's better to have that presence as a person that we're not in opposition to, but in relationship with. Much more helpful.
And this also, because I'm thinking it's the nightmares that more cause people to seek wanting to know about their dreams, and that kind of goes well with the idea about using dreams to heal as well, because isn't quite often the nightmare, it's what gets people's attention, that something's up.
It's true. Nightmares will get our attention, and they often will suggest something's up. And you mentioned healing, both emotional and physiological.
Yes.
So something's going on in our body that is off, right? It seems almost magical, but it's actually very causal. It's probably the most practical of all connections in working with dream. When there's something that's out of balance in our body, there's a disease syndrome that's about to present, or there's arthritis that's beginning to move through, whenever there's something that's a little off, of course the body will present that. We may not get it literally, but subliminally, in the dream time, it'll pick it up and represent it as an image. So when we hear the image and we think about the image from a somatic or a body perspective or a physical health point of view, more often than not, these images will come and they'll present not only, that's a curious thing, they not only present the illness, right, or the impending illness, they also present something of value in terms of what's helpful adjunctively to our healing or curative process.
Because I believe you even tell us that quite often the dream or the unconscious knows something's wrong before it even manifests.
Yes, there's a great story. I was lecturing at an adult education class, and this fellow, and I was on this very topic, dreams and how they are related to health and healing, right? And I looked at the back, the place was just filled with people. It's a topic that everybody's very interested in. Okay. And this man was there, and I could just tell he didn't want to be there. I mean, this is the last thing he wanted to be doing on a Saturday morning. And I could tell also that his wife was sitting right next to him, very much wanted to be there. So I figured she brought him to this topic. So I asked the question, does anybody have a dream that they're thinking about that's been particularly potent for them, that's visited over the last number of days, and I'll see if it has anything to do with health or healing. Well, of course, his hand shot up in defiance, Yes, Dr. Eisenstadt, I got a dream, and you just know that voice. You know that person, right? And he said, I have a dream, you know. And in my dream, there was this piano leg, and this piano leg was just broken. And I said, okay. And he said, you know, it's kind of show you. And I just saw his wife just kind of cringe right there at that moment, and he's starting to get riled up and almost threatening. You know, it's kind of like a, and of course, you know, when you're working with dream and imagery, it's like getting you know, a baseball right over the middle of the plate, right? Because I said to him, I asked very kindly and with curiosity, you know, what kind of piano leg was that, sir? He said, well, it was a piano leg, and it was just like a, you know, old-time wooden piano leg, and it just had this little niche right in the third little row. I said, well, can you come up and draw it on the board? Well, he's now starting to, you know, feel this thing. And of course, his wife's now perking up a little bit. Oh, he's involved, he's engaged, right? So he puts it on the board for us, sketches it out. And I noticed that it's just a little bit of a wedge right in this, like, third place. So I just asked a simple question, because dreams will pick up, just as you mentioned. They will pick up before we get to the idea that there's something a little off. And he said, I said, well, just noticing that, I'm wondering if you're having any back trouble. And he just, of course now, I notice his wife who has a smile, right? Now she's really engaged, you know, and he's really wondering about this whole thing. And he said, well, that's curious, how would you know that? And I said, well, because, you know, sometimes dreams will pick out images and they'll replicate, or they'll be like x-rays that they'll take of the actual condition. And I said, well, you know, I'm wondering, because that's third, you know, and then I know something about how the spine is shaped, and I know something about certain systems that imagine the spine as a metaphor for a certain chart, like a kundalini and certain imaginal systems. So I asked him, I said, you know, I'm curious, just, you know, given that your back is hurting, I wonder when the last time is that you spend any playtime. Well, he was silent, and I could see that he started turning ashen. He said, play? I have no time for play. I'm working 5-6 days a week. Of course, no time for play, because the very place of the rupture was the place that had to do with being a bit overbearing, you know, if you read it as a map, right? And I said, you know, and I'm not a physician, so I can't be outside of the scope of my practice, but I said, you know, one possibility is to really go have something like this, you know, x-rayed and have a consultation. Okay, well, I get a call 4 days later, right? And I call, and this voice comes on, not even a name, a voice. Doc, is this you? And of course I immediately know who's calling. Yeah, this is me. Howdy. Well, I was in your workshop last Saturday. I said, yeah. He said, well, I got to tell you something. I thought you were full of, well, you know what, but actually I went to see my doctor, and indeed I have a ruptured disc, and he said if I would have kept doing what I'm doing, I would have injured myself permanently. So I got to thank you. So thank you. I said, you're welcome, and he hung up. But dreams will do that. They'll, from an example like that, it's somewhat literal, right? It's just taking a picture. To any kind of symptom that comes forward, you know, that they will present an image, or they'll present the disturbance in a way that gets our attention. So when nightmares come, or a scary image happens, I'll take the time to inquire, you know, is there something that's going on physiologically? At least I'll reflect on it. Particularly if the image is occurring again and again and again, if the image has some kind of organic quality to it, I'm curious. If the image takes place in a person's home, because home is an image of our body more often than not. When those kinds of images, for example, if I'm in a home and there's a broken pipe, you know, I get curious about certain things. If there's disturbance in the attic, I would get curious about certain things. Now, I don't jump to a conclusion, because that would be irresponsible.
Yes.
But I do get curious.
Another good point that you make in the book, that when we are getting these clues through us, through our dreams, and that you do say to seek professional help on a medical, something that might be a medical issue.
Yeah, I do. And, you know, I think the old idea was that sometimes psychologists and physicians, medical physicians, there's some conflict, particularly if you're working with issues that involve both the psyche and the body. The concern is that, you know, people are doing something that is outside their expertise. A newer idea is that if we work collaboratively, dream work is very, very helpful adjunctively.
Yeah.
So in addition to working with a physician or a physical therapist for that matter, when you're working with a dream, it's possible to allow the dreams to support the medical procedures that we're involved with. I work with people here in Santa Barbara called the Santa Barbara Healing Sanctuary.
Yes.
People that have very severe disease syndromes, sometimes at the end of life kinds of syndromes. And we work with dream because there's a lot of tradition going all the way back to classical Greece where the actual practice of medicine oriented and revolved around the wisdom and the teachings that come forward through the dream, through the imagery in dream. So it's the idea being that the physician, right, in their words, the divine healer, the physician is actually embedded in the image of dream. So to be able to host that, going back to our first point, to develop a relationship with that figure, then we have the capacity to evoke that figure to assist us in our healing. So if I'm dealing with cancer, or if I'm dealing with any one of the very severe syndromes, in addition to the chemotherapy, in addition to the medical care, we can evoke those kinds of figures that really actually boost the immune system, offer internal support, and different kind of self-esteem. I'm not so identified only with the disease, with the cancer, but I'm able to also work with that, and two, work with the figures of imagination, which just creates a better quality of life. With a better quality of life and curiosity comes a boost to the immune system, boost to the immune system. So it all kind of, goes together. So I think the new idea is to work really collaboratively and really have high regard for the wonder and the miracle of medical science, and at the same time the extraordinary wisdom and wonder of these traditions, in particular working with the dream.
And speaking of collaboration and new ideas, I know that one of the big new things you're working on is the Global Dream Initiative.
Right.
Could you talk to us a little about that?
Well, yes, I will. And it picks up right on that idea. The idea is that dreams come and they are fascinating. I mean, they have an intelligence. In fact, all of us are dreaming, even though it's hard to remember dreams some of the time. There's 2 or 3 tools or techniques I can share to help remember dream, but we all dream. And a third of our life is spent in sleep time, and then a big portion of that, or a portion of that at least, is in the dream time. Dreams are happening. And there's an intelligence at work. There's an extraordinary intelligence that's at work in the dream itself. And people from Einstein to Bergman, from people making films to great discoveries in art and sciences, their inspiration comes from the images that they experienced in the dream. So there's enormous capacity, right? And if nothing more, it evokes curiosity and it evokes ingenuity, it evokes creativity. I mean, it's a creative response to living in the world. It's a way of figuring things out that we might not otherwise have access to. So the idea with the Global Dream Initiative is this notion that in the world, and it's one of the tenets of dream tending, that it's not only people that are dreaming.
Yeah.
And that's the first step. If it's not only people that are dreaming, if we imagine the world as what we would say ensouled, and that's just a fancy way of saying the world's alive, that there's a spark, a living spark in virtually everything, in the trees and the oceans and the mountains. I mean, we all have a sense of that when we're walking about and experience things as coming to life. Even buildings sometimes, there's that aesthetic response. They seem to have a sense of a life of their own, obviously way different than the human experience. It's still something. There's something of an experience that the others that we share the planet with have. In fact, part of the calamity that I suspect we're in as modern people is that there's this distance between us as people in our fantasy of being dominant over the planet versus being a participant with everything else that we share the planet with. So if we go to that place and imagine that everything is alive and that at some level sparks a dream, then we can imagine that their particular spark, their particular genius, the particular spirit of the lake, or that particular goddess in the sea, or whatever that might be, could present itself in the dreams of people. If that's the case, then we are interested in the intelligence that comes forward in dream throughout the world, right? And if the Global Dream Initiative is about listening into the dreams of humans in relationship to what's going on from the planet.
Okay.
The question becomes not what we can do to save the planet, rather what the planet is asking of us
Yes.
from its point of view. Right?
That's huge.
It is huge, and it's big. It's responsive, receptive. We're working now with the United Nations and with a whole variety of other groups, and they're very, very interested in bringing that quality of intelligence into. I mean, if we could hear into, and now technology allows us to do that, if we could hear into the many, many peoples from many, many landscapes, from many, many places, listen into the dream time for their response to what's going on ecologically, politically, socially, economically, we would have a whole bunch of information that would be valuable and useful and instructive. So that's the project. It's just getting going, and so far it's been highly received.
Thank you so much for spending time with us today. Again, Steve's book is Dream Tending, and thank you so much for your stories and for your knowledge and for spending time with us today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for staying tuned to Myth is All Around Us. As we learned in our last segment, the Global Dream Initiative is exploring dreams not only of human beings, but of all the living things around us. Keeping that in mind, we close our show with a visit to a location in Long Beach that has been a sacred place for gathering and dreaming for over a millennium, Rancho Los Alamitos. Today, Rancho Los Alamitos is in the heart of Long Beach, located on the edge of California State University and surrounded by a private residential community, both of which were built on the land that was once part of the rancho itself. Historical, archaeological, and anthropological evidence has all indicated that this is the site of Pavugna, the ancestral sacred place of origin of the Tongva Gabrielino people. Cindy Alvatrite, a Tongva leader and scholar, has herself called this location the place where the dreams of the ancestors emerged. The name Pavugna itself translates to mean in the sphere or in the crowd. We leave you today with a few shots of the spring splendor of Rancho Los Alamitos, which is open to the public free of charge. On behalf of the Rancho Los Alamitos Foundation, we invite you and your family to come explore its beauty for yourself. Information on visiting the rancho is available on the web at rancholosAlamitos.org. Thank you for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of Myth is All Around Us.